Hey, Bone, I had a little birdie whisper in my ear late last night that there could be a couple of commitments coming for Alabama today. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I'd keep a close eye on BamaInsider.com today, and also my Twitter handle at Andrew J. Bone, because I think it's going to be a big day for Alabama. Probably in the next, I would say, 30 minutes, keep a pretty close eye on, because Rashad Cheney, four-star defensive lineman out of Georgia, plans on announcing his decision. It's a former Georgia commitment, backed away from his commitment a couple months ago, and took an unofficial visit to Alabama this past weekend, and really hit it off with the coaching staff. It's been a lot of time with Coach Kulikowski and also Coach Gaddis. Coach Gaddis is a guy who's been recruiting him, and I think it's going to be Coach Gaddis's first big reel in for the Crimson Tide. So big defensive lineman, 6'2.5", about 265, 270 pounds. So I think it's going to be a good day there for Alabama in the next, like I said, in the next about 30 minutes. We could see another commitment today. There's some big guys that are going to be on campus. Alabama also hosted a big defensive lineman from Hawaii that we talked about last week, Tuateli, who visited the last few days at a St. Louis high school in Honolulu, same high school as Tua Tagovailoa, and also his brother, who is now at Thompson High School. But that's a name to kind of watch out for. And then one more to really watch out for is Christian Harris, a really good athlete out of Louisiana. Plans on returning to Tuscaloosa this weekend. Visited a couple weeks ago, and very high on Alabama's wish list. And I think he's leaning heavily towards the Crimson Tide. So, we'll see what else happens, but I think we're in for a pretty good run for Alabama over the next probably over the next 3 weeks, especially with 8A coming up. A lot of top prospects that are going to visit over the next few weekends. So I think we can see Crimson Tide really start to take off in their 2019 recruiting class.
More on Cheney, because we know that Nick Saban has built this program starting on the lines of scrimmage with offensive and defensive linemen, and defensive linemen in particular kind of set the tone for your team in the SEC. I'm curious, Bone, on some background here, because we know that Alabama and Georgia are the top two programs right now in the conference, as evidenced last season. Kirby Smart and Nick Saban, the battle for defensive linemen, the battle for Alabama to get back in the state of Georgia. As you said, he was a Georgia commitment. What happened there? Did he decide that he just wanted to go in a different direction, or did Georgia? What happened with the decommitment? Obviously, it's to Alabama's benefit, but what went on there? Do you know?
Not a lot. I mean, I think there's some conflicting info out there about what kind of happened. Some people said that Georgia backed away. Some people have said that he decided to back away and kind of open up his mind and look at all the programs and decided to take a visit to Alabama. Now he recently said that he had just not ever heard from Alabama. He was always interested in Alabama and just never heard from them prior to the new coaching staff coming in. And then once he started building that relationship with the new defensive line coach, really his interest started to peak, and decided to take that unofficial visit last weekend, and just really loved it over there. And I think Coach Saban is kind of telling these kids, hey, if you're going to commit, we don't want you to take any more visits. We want you to be very solid and not visit anywhere else. And I think after committing to Georgia, and then now if he commits to Alabama today, I think he'll be pretty set on his decision. And Alabama is really going after a lot of defensive linemen this year. We've already mentioned a few. There's a lot of other guys. And some people say, well, why go ahead and take this guy when there's so many out there? Well, the good thing for Alabama is they plan on taking 5 to 6 defensive linemen in this year's recruiting class. They need some size. They need some numbers.
Absolutely.
And, Coach Kulikowski really liked what he saw in Rashad Cheney, and he became a top target for them. So they're ready to go ahead and get him on board and get the defensive line class started.
So a good pickup could be coming Alabama's way anytime. Stay tuned to Andrew Bone's Twitter account, and also, of course, to BamaInsider.com. You can follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew J. Bone. Hey, I want to ask you too about Paul Tyson, the quarterback at Hewitt-Trussville, of course, the great grandson of Coach Bryant, pro style quarterback, big arm, excellent mechanics, really good prospect. In the recruiting process with Alabama, there's a lot of things involved here. With the family and the pressure that might come with him coming to Alabama. At the same time, it looks like Alabama's the clear leader there. Could something be happening in the commitment watch area with Paul Tyson here soon?
Yeah, I'd keep a very, very close eye on him as well. It's very possible we see him pull the trigger pretty soon. I don't think it's going to take too much longer with him. Obviously he's got the family connections, but and I think early on in his recruitment, and early on when people started talking about him, everybody knew him as great grandson to Paul Bear Bryant. But if you go and watch him play, he had a great season at Hewitt-Trussville this past year, threw for over 3,500 yards. But then you go watch him at a camp, in a camp setting, throwing to elite receivers, going up against elite defensive backs, and watching him work. I mean, he's a good-looking kid, and he's got a very strong arm. I mean, he's close to about 6'4". He's a big kid, really smart. Holds himself together extremely well, and he's got a great relationship with some of the other Alabama commitments right now, including Pierce Quick, the Rivals 100 offensive lineman from Hewitt-Trussville. I mean, that's his guy right there. So I would only imagine that he will be a part of the Alabama's recruiting class before too long. So I'd pay very close attention to Paul Tyson.
Of course, Nick's already committed to Auburn, the quarterback out of Pennsylvania Valley. We expect Tyson to wind up at Alabama. What about Talia Tagovailoa, Tua's younger brother? That'd be quite a dynamic duo from in-state quarterbacks if Alabama were to get both of them.
Yeah, well, Alabama plans on taking 2 quarterbacks in this year's recruiting class, and I think as of right now, those are probably the 2 guys that I would say are going to be Alabama's quarterbacks. Now, there's some other guys that are out there that they want to bring on campus that are going to visit throughout the course of the year, but it would shock me completely if those 2 guys aren't Alabama's 2 quarterback commitments, and we could see both of those guys on the commitment list. Maybe even before the summer. I don't think you'll last too much longer. I don't think you'll last, all the way through the football season. I think we'll see both those guys definitely committed before the fall, but could be a little bit sooner than that.
I want to ask you about an in-state linebacker that I really, really like, and that's Vonta Bentley out of Jackson Owen High School. 6'2", 220, can really run. I don't know. I'm reading that Alabama has not shown a ton of interest. Of course, we know lately Jackson Owen's been a strong Auburn school. I know Clemson's recruited him, with a lot of intensity. Just personally, I really like this young man. How much interest is there from Alabama and Bentley?
Well, I think there's definitely some interest. Alabama extended him an offer a few months ago, and it was not necessarily an offer to go ahead and commit, but they kind of identified him as one of their top targets, and they still want to see him a little bit during the spring. They want to see him at camp, and Alabama's really involved with a lot of really good linebackers in this year's class. They've already have a commitment from King Wakuda out of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like Christian Harris is probably going to pop for Alabama pretty soon. There's a lot of other guys who are still out there, and I think they only plan on taking about 4, maybe 5. I think 5 might be stretching it a little bit, but definitely 4 linebackers in this class. They really want to get it right. They want to make sure that they're getting the right guys, and he's definitely a guy that they like a lot, that they're recruiting, and I think they just want to see him a little bit more. Another guy that I think will end up on Alabama's commitment list is Lakia Henry, the top JUCO linebacker in the country. So
wow.
He's an inside guy. So that's 3 guys off the top of my head that I think are going to be in Alabama's class. You have 1 more spot, possibly 2. So you really got to evaluate a lot of different guys and make sure you're giving the green light to the right one. But he is an in-state guy. He really likes Alabama. He's a smart kid too. I think that's something that really stands out about him. Is he has a very high GPA, and he can pretty much get into any school in the country that he wants to. So that's not going to be an issue for him. Plus, he's just not just a good student, but a good overall kid. I had an opportunity to meet him a couple years ago. He was involved in this youth program that I had a chance to go speak to, and he was only, I think he was just a freshman at the time, and I had a chance to meet him. And one of his mentors, Chris Rogers, who played at Alabama. A lot of people remember that name. One of his mentors is Chris Rogers, and Chris introduced us and said, this is going to be a really good football player down the road. And I think he was playing at Parker High School then, and we had a chance to spend some time together. And just a really good kid, and I think he's got a chance to be a really good football player in college. And we'll see where he ends up.
Rivals recruiting reporter Andrew Bone with us here on the Gary Harris Show. Could be a big day for Alabama football recruiting. Rashad Cheney Jr., the 4-star defensive line prospect out of Georgia, possibly committing to Alabama. Keep it tuned to Andrew Bone on Twitter and at Rivals.com, BamaInsider.com for more information on that. Back to defensive linemen, because, again, that's where Alabama's built this program. I think that's been the biggest area where Alabama has differentiated itself from other teams, has just been flat out its ability to dominate on the defensive line. I think next weekend, Bone, you correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe this weekend, Kayvon Thibodeau, the 5-star defensive end from Oaks Christian High School in Thousand Oaks, California, a player that anybody in the country would love to have. Maybe it's this weekend. He's due on campus. Am I right there?
Yeah, that's right. Kayvon Thibodeau, 5-star defensive end out of Oaks Christian in Westlake Village, California, plans on visiting the Crimson Tide, and obviously that's going to be a big target for Alabama throughout the year. I don't think he's going to be in a rush to make a decision. He's probably going to be one of those guys who takes a while to decide. But the good thing is Alabama's got some California kids on campus that were number 1 recruits in the country, like Najee Harris. They're going to be on campus recruiting him and spending time with him. So, and then it looks like he's going to be recruited by Jeff Banks, the new Alabama assistant special teams coach, who's known as one of the best recruiters in the country. But obviously he'll have Coach Kulikowski and Coach Tosh Lapoy, who will be recruiting him as well. So he'll definitely have some elite guys recruiting him. Obviously Nick Saban will spend some time with him. I'll tell you what, one thing that is going to be really big for Alabama, especially this spring. If you're watching those Bama cut videos on online that have been great with guys like Julio Jones and Eddie Jackson and obviously Ryan Anderson and a few other NFL players who are on campus. These guys are on campus right now. They're spending time. So a lot of these recruits are getting to meet these guys. They're getting to meet Julio Jones. They're getting to meet Eddie Jackson. They're getting to meet guys who are playing at a high level in the NFL who played at Alabama. So they're going to be able to get advice from these guys. So I think that's huge for Alabama, especially this spring, getting a lot of these elite guys from all over the country on campus to spend time with, especially a guy like Julio Jones, who, many consider the best wide receiver in the NFL.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. Finally, you've referenced these new coaches a lot. I don't know that Alabama necessarily needs to be re-energized in recruiting the way Alabama consistently recruits, but you mentioned Coach Cool, Coach Gaddis. These new coaches, boy, they have really come in here and hit the ground running, and they're recruiting with a lot of juice, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. And they get it. They're young guys. They get what's kind of important to kids right now. And social media is such a big thing. And I'm not saying that that's the only thing that they're using. They're using a lot of different platforms and trying to recruit them and staying in touch with these guys every single day. But, if Alabama, obviously they just won another national championship, but it seemed like they needed a little bit of a kick, a little bit of a boost. I think they certainly got it with these new coaches. And, obviously, Coach Saban's loving. I think he's loving it. And obviously you can tell by the way, they've been doing this Bama Cut barbershop show and getting that out. I mean, trust me, they're sending those out to every single recruit every single week. And, you definitely think that Alabama's certainly coming up with new ways to recruit. And obviously after, only signing the number 7 recruiting class in the country, they want to get back to what they're used to, and that's number 1. And I think they're certainly, heading in the right direction with this new staff and this new recruiting momentum.
No doubt about it. We're on commitment watch today for Rashad Cheney Jr. Follow Bone at Andrew J. Bone on Twitter. BamaInsider.com. He'll have all the information. And speaking of Bama Cuts, we're going to come back with that here in the next segment. Thank you so much, Bone.
Hey, Jerry. See you, man.